And here people were thinking the undercard might not be exciting. It's a nice win for you. How do you feel about your fight?
Yeah, it was a great fight. Again, my technique worked this time, so it was fantastic. And that was definitely one of those things that it was in the back of my head. And Dana mentioned it again in the locker room. You know, everyone was knocking the card because a lot of the names fell off. But look at these fights so far; they're incredible. So we're giving the fans their money's worth. I truly believe that. And you know, just because we don't have the name doesn't mean we can't put out the performance. And I think we're showing that so far.
How much does that factor into your brain, though, when you're thinking about fight bonuses and putting on an exciting show, and at the same time, what if your strategy wasn't necessarily to go head on it?
It could happen, yeah. You know, I walked into this fight, exactly what I worked on is pretty much what happened. You know, again, sometimes it doesn't happen, but this time it did, and it turned out pretty good in my favor, and at the same time, it gave the fans the entertainment they needed, and you know, it's my pleasure always to do that as well, right?
You're coming off a loss that took place down in Brazil. How does it feel to be the guy at with the home crowd advantage tonight?
Yeah, it's been a long time. I've traveled all over the world, and finally, you know, I've come home, basically. That's how I felt, and I did get a little emotional. I tend to be a little emotional guy, and you know, one of the things they always told me when I walked out there was, be yourself. And that's me. I'm a bit emotional sometimes, and I also feel for my opponents. You know, he came out, you know, from Houston, Texas, flew out here to fight me in front of all these people, and, you know, you got to give a man credit for that, and I respect him, and you know, I think he's a great fighter still, and you know, if we were to fight again, it might be, you know, different.
You're known as a very strong Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. How satisfying is it to get a KO win?
Yeah, I mean, I do have kickboxing experience. Unfortunately, my first fight in the UFC didn't turn out too good for me in that sense. I looked really stiff, and there were a lot of things that were wrong with me in terms of my technique and the way my body was moving, and it was something that I seriously had to be very honest with myself when I went back to the gym and just break myself down again. And it was very hard, but I'm very lucky that my coaches, you know, instilled the confidence in me again to come out and believe still.
You were very emotional. What was the first thing that went through your mind after that?
It just was a rough camp, a lot of doubts. You know, I remember even 2 weeks ago, I felt like I was overtraining. I had to stop training for 4 days, and then I asked myself whether or not I wanted to do this, if I had fights left in me. And, you know, when you start thinking, like, even today I thought about that, and it was one of those things that, you know, my life's changed quite a bit in the last year, so, yeah, I don't know. It's just, I guess I do have some fights left in me.
How has it changed?
Well, I have a girlfriend who's very, very supportive, and in fact, if it weren't for her, I have to admit she's an athletic therapist and an osteopath, and that's how I met her. I happened to be a broken MMA fighter, and she just happened to come in and fix me, and I actually developed a relationship with friends, and next thing you know, we're a couple, and she's basically gotten me to a lot of my fights recently to get to this point, and I owe her a ton, and again, that's why my body still functions at this point.
So how seriously did you consider walking away from the sport?
You know, I had walked away originally, you know, even like 2-3 years ago, just because my body was just so broken, so many injuries that I never took care of, and again, when I first came to the UFC, you know, the one saving grace for me right off the bat was the fact that a lot of the older kind of school guys that were around at the time when the featherweights weren't in the UFC kind of looked at me and said, "Hey, you're here. How come it's taking you so long?" And I had no answer. It is what it is. It just didn't pan out that way, and you know, here I am now. So I'm pretty happy right now, and like I said, I guess I'm on cloud nine, or whatever you want to call it.
So in those 2 years that you were away from the cage, what were you doing?
I was still teaching, training other people, and you know, it took a lot of young fighters to come in and for me to sort of start training again and start to, you know, it wasn't something I thought about, but then all of a sudden they look at me going, "How come you're still not fighting? You still have all these things to offer, and you're not fighting." And I thought, maybe I still have something in me, and that's why I decided to come back. They're the reason why I came back.
Can you just talk us through the knockout?
Yeah, I had to figure out his timing a little bit. I knew he was. I obviously had a little bit of a reach on him, the height. I knew he had good looping punches, so I had to be careful with that. Make sure I was shelling up nice, and but also at the same time finding the opening and countering. And that head kick that I throw, it's something that I throw often. And whether or not it lands, sometimes it just to create a block or some sort of situation. And again, it's exactly how I trained it. I threw it. He had actually blocked the second one, and then he dipped into my right hand, and that's how I trained it. And that's how it happened. And again, it worked. So.
Could you just give us the final word on Showdown Joe? He says that he's the best fighter in media. Could you just, is he any good?
Wow, you really put me on the spot, didn't you? Wow. Well, considering I helped him a bit, I'd like to think that he's picked up a few things, and he's pretty decent. How's that? Is that all right? All right.
We'll end on that.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Awesome. Thank you.